My wife secretly stole $250, $0 from our joint account and bought a house with her boss behind my back, then turned around and sued me for half the property in a messy legal battle I never saw coming. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. The craziest thing hit me out of nowhere. My wife, Emily, was cheating on me with her boss, and somehow she managed to steal $250,000 from our joint account to buy a house with him behind my back. It all started with small signs, little things that didn't make sense at first, like her being secretive about her phone or coming home late without any good explanation. But I never really suspected anything serious, just typical stress from work, maybe a bit of her being distant. Then out of nowhere, I stumbled onto it. It was a random day, just a regular Thursday, when I decided to check our bank account because I noticed some strange charges. I wasn't expecting to see a transfer of $250, $0 going somewhere I didn't recognize. That's when my heart stopped. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My wife had transferred a huge chunk of our savings, money we'd worked years for, into an account that didn't belong to us. I looked closer, and the account belonged to her boss, Mark. That's when everything changed. I remembered how Emily had been acting lately, secretive, sneaky, always brushing me off when I asked about her day. She'd been working late a lot, saying she had big deals to close, but I'd started to notice her phone buzzing constantly, her slipping out of the house without telling me where she was going. I even caught her in little lies, saying she was at the gym when I saw her sneaking out of a restaurant with Mark one night. I didn't want to believe it, but seeing that transfer confirmed what I'd suspected. Emily was having an affair, and she was using our money to buy herself a new life with him. I felt sick. My first instinct was anger. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that? But beneath the anger was a deep, hollow hurt. I'd trusted her with everything. We had plans, dreams of buying a house, starting a family someday. And now I was looking at her, living a double life, lying to my face, stealing from us. It was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so naive. I knew I had to confront her. I kept replaying that moment in my head, trying to think of the right words, but honestly, I was just furious. I wanted answers, and I wanted to know how she could be so cold, so calculating. That night, I waited until she got home. When she walked through the door, her face was already defensive, like she knew I'd found out. I showed her the bank statement, and her eyes widened for a split second before she put on her fake, bitchy smirk. "Oh, you found out," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Big deal, it's just money, you're overreacting." I lost it. I asked her how she could do this, how she could lie to me for months, maybe longer. She tried to brush it off, claiming it was just a business deal, that she was doing this for us, that I didn't understand the big picture. But I wasn't buying it. She kept spinning stories, trying to make me feel guilty for suspecting her, but I could see right through her lies. She was lying, deflecting, trying to manipulate her way out of it. That moment was the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and completely lost. How do you even begin to process something like this? The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with everything, had been cheating on me and stealing from us. My mind kept circling back to the money, how she managed to hide it, what she planned to do with it, and what her real intentions were. It was like my entire world had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. The worst part, I knew this was only the beginning. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind kept racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just uncovered. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. The woman I'd loved, trusted, shared my life with, she'd been lying to me for who knows how long, and now she was trying to spin it like it was nothing. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all the signs? How could she keep such a huge secret from me? Was I really that blind? I started digging deeper. I knew I had to find out what she was up to. I got access to her phone, her emails, anything I could find. It wasn't easy, and honestly, I felt like a damn stalker, but I had to know the truth. That's when I found the emails between her and Mark. They were full of flirtatious messages, plans to meet, talk about projects they were working on. It was obvious she was cheating on me in the worst way. They even discussed the house, how they'd keep it quiet from everyone, especially me, and how she'd act like nothing was wrong. What really made my blood boil was reading her excuses. She told me she was working late or meeting clients, but here she was planning a whole new life with her boss. She lied about everything, said she loved me, that I was the only one, but her texts told a different story. I could see her planning dates, talking about sex with him, saying she was tired of pretending everything was perfect with me. It was like I was reading the story of my own betrayal, written in her own words. I felt numb. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, realizing I'd been played. All those nights I stayed up worrying about her, all the little fights, the missed connections. It was all because she was out with him, lying to my face. I couldn't believe I'd been so stupid. How could she do this? How could she destroy everything we built? The next step was clear. I had to confront her again, this time with everything I'd found. I needed answers, but I also needed to protect myself. I planned to catch her in the act, to see if she'd admit everything. I set up a little surveillance, hidden cameras, the works. I wanted to catch her red-handed, see her reaction when she realized I knew everything. I didn't trust her anymore. She'd lied so much. I didn't know what was real and what was just her lies. When she came home that evening, I was already waiting. I played it cool, but inside I was boiling. I showed her the messages, the emails, the bank transfer. Her face went pale, but she quickly recovered, putting on that bitchy smirk again. "You're overreacting," she said, brushing me off. "It's just business, you're being paranoid." But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I knew about the affair, about the money, about everything. That's when she finally cracked a little, started to get defensive, said she'd explain everything. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying all along. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, angry, and deeply hurt. I'd loved her, thought we had a future. Yet she'd been sneaking around, screwing her boss, stealing from us. I kept asking myself how I could have missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind to her true nature. The worst part was the sense of betrayal. Someone I trusted, someone I thought loved me, had been using me for her own gain. It felt like my entire world was crumbling, piece by piece. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this in the dark with her lying to my face. But part of me still wanted to believe there was a way to fix it, to save what was left. Deep down, I knew that was probably a mistake. Still, I needed some time to figure out what I really wanted. I told her I'd think about everything, that I needed space. She threw a fit, said I was overreacting, that she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt me. But I didn't believe her anymore. I couldn't. Not after everything I'd uncovered. That night I stayed up again, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. The betrayal ran so deep it was like I was living someone else's nightmare. I kept thinking about the money she stole, how she used it to buy that house with Mark, how she'd planned to keep me out of her life forever. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies. And yet somehow I knew I had to find a way out of this mess. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was never going to be the same. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep, and kept replaying everything over and over in my head. Every time I thought I had a handle on the situation, another shock hit me. Turns out Emily wasn't just cheating and stealing money. She was actively trying to cover her tracks. I found out she'd been draining our joint account over months, funneling small amounts here and there, gradually building up to the $250, $0 she eventually transferred to Mark. She'd been planning this for a long time, I realized, probably since we bought the house she was now living in with her boss. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. I couldn't believe how she'd lied, how she'd manipulated me into trusting her, only to turn around and use that trust to destroy everything. It was like she'd been living a double life, one where she was the perfect wife, and another where she was screwing her boss and stealing our savings. The betrayal felt like a punch in the stomach every time I thought about it. I felt so stupid for not seeing the signs earlier, for not noticing the subtle changes in her behavior. One day, I decided I needed to get some concrete proof of her ongoing affair. I set up hidden cameras around the house, hidden microphones, the works. I wanted to catch her in the act, not just rely on her emails or texts. The plan was to catch her red-handed, then confront her with everything I had. Honestly, I was terrified of what I might see, but I couldn't keep living in this fog of lies. I had to know for sure, no matter how painful it would be. The first night I set everything up, I felt like a damn criminal. I watched the cameras, waiting for her to come home. When she finally arrived, she looked different, more tense, more nervous. She tried to act normal, but I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes. When she went into the bedroom, I stayed in the living room, heart pounding. I watched her through the camera feed, and what I saw made my blood run cold. She took her phone out, started texting, then slipped out of the house. I followed her from a distance, keeping my distance but making sure I knew where she was going. She drove to a nearby hotel, one I'd never been inside, and I watched her walk in with Mark. They stayed for a couple of hours, and I managed to get some photos. I remember feeling this strange mix of relief and rage. Relief that I finally had proof, and rage because I'd been played for a fool all along. When she finally came back home, I was waiting in the dark, ready to confront her. I didn't want to give her a chance to deny it anymore. The moment I told her I knew about her and Mark, her face twisted into this snarky, bitchy expression. "Oh, so you're spying now," she sneered. "You're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out the photos and the recordings I'd made. Her face went pale and her bravado crumbled. She tried to lie her way out, saying it was just sex, that it didn't mean anything, that I was overreacting, but I knew better. I saw the truth in her eyes. She'd been lying to me for months, using me, betraying everything we had. That night I felt like I was living in a nightmare. The woman I loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything, was gone. All I had was this cold, bitter reality. I was furious, yes, but also devastated. How could she do this? How could she be so cruel? I kept asking myself if I'd done anything wrong, if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been a bad husband. But deep down, I knew none of that mattered anymore. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces. I sat alone in the dark, staring at the pictures of her and Mark, trying to process what I'd just seen. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was okay. I had to make a decision. Was I going to fight for my marriage, or was it over? Honestly, I felt so broken, so betrayed, that I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. The pain was overwhelming, but I also knew I had to protect myself. I started thinking about lawyers, about how to get my life back. The money, the house, everything was a mess now. And then there was the legal side. I found out she'd already started a lawsuit, claiming half the house because she said she contributed to the mortgage, even though she'd secretly bought her new house with Mark with the money she stole. It was a mess I never saw coming. I realized I was in for a long, messy fight, one that would probably cost me more than I had ever imagined. But I also knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her ruin me, not without a fight. The legal battle started almost immediately after I uncovered everything. Emily filed that lawsuit claiming half the house, citing contributions she supposedly made, things that were outright lies, but I knew she'd try to spin it anyway. I wasn't surprised. She always had a way of twisting facts to serve her own ends. I had to get a lawyer, and I quickly realized this was going to cost me a lot, both financially and emotionally. Still, I couldn't let her take what was rightfully mine, especially after everything she'd done. I spent days gathering evidence: bank statements, emails, the photos from the hotel, the recordings of her and Mark. I also found some of her other secret messages, little hints she'd dropped about the house, her plans, her affair. I needed to build a solid case. I hired a lawyer who specialized in divorce and asset disputes. We went over everything, and I poured my heart out about how betrayed I felt. I told him about the money she stole, how she used it to buy her house with Mark, and how she'd lied right to my face. It was a gut-wrenching process, reliving every detail. Meanwhile, Emily was already trying to spin her story. She claimed I was controlling, jealous, paranoid, everything but admitting her guilt. She insisted that the money was a business investment, even though I had proof it was a personal affair. She told friends and family I was overreacting, that she loved me and was trying to fix things, but I knew better. I saw through her lies now. The truth was right there, staring me in the face. One of the most shocking moments during this whole ordeal was when she turned her accusations around. She started saying I was abusive, that I'd been controlling her, that I'd been cheating myself, trying to make herself look like the victim. It was classic gaslighting. She was good at it. She'd always been good at twisting things to her advantage, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew her game. I knew she was desperate to save herself, to keep the house, to keep the money, even if it meant destroying me. The emotional toll was intense. I felt like I was losing my mind some days. It was hard seeing her act so cold and calculating, knowing she'd been lying to me for so long. I kept questioning myself. Did I miss the signs? Was I a terrible husband? But then I remembered all the times I'd tried to connect with her, the nights she'd shut me out, the times she'd lied about her whereabouts. The truth was, she'd been the one pushing me away, all while she was sneaking around with Mark and plotting her escape. As the court date approached, I felt a strange mix of hope and dread. I knew I had a solid case, but I also knew she'd do anything to keep her new life with Mark. She was manipulative, and I didn't trust her to play fair. I prepared myself for the worst: possible lies, false accusations, maybe even dirty tactics. I had to stay strong, focus on the facts, and protect what little dignity I had left. The day of the hearing was one of the most stressful days of my life. I sat in that courtroom feeling exposed and vulnerable. She looked confident, like she thought she was going to win. But I knew better. I had everything laid out: proof of the stolen money, evidence of her affair, the emails, the recordings. I was ready. When it was my turn to speak, I laid it all out. How she'd betrayed me, how she'd used our joint savings to buy her house with her boss, how she'd lied to everyone about her intentions. Her lawyer tried to paint me as controlling and paranoid, but I didn't bite. I stayed calm and factual. I told the court about the bank transfer, the emails, the hotel stay, everything. I emphasized that she had deliberately manipulated our finances, that she'd lied about her contributions to the house, and that her actions had caused irreparable damage. I could see her sneering and whispering to her lawyer, but I didn't care. I was just focused on telling the truth. After hours of testimony, the judge finally made a ruling. It wasn't what Emily wanted, but it was enough to set things straight. She was ordered to return the stolen money, and the house was awarded to me outright. She'd have to pay me damages for the emotional distress and the financial loss. It was a small victory, but it felt like a huge weight off my shoulders. I could finally breathe again, knowing that justice was at least partly served. But the aftermath was bittersweet. I had won the legal battle, yes, but I knew I'd never get back the trust I'd lost. Emily moved out, furious and bitter, trying to spin her version of the story to everyone who'd listen. I stayed in the house for a while, trying to pick up the pieces. The pain was still there, but I started to see a way forward. I learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you about your own strength. I realized I'd been naive, but I also understood that I deserved better. Moving on wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to rebuild my life, without her, without the lies, and without the betrayal. The months that followed were some of the hardest I've ever had to face. I stayed in the house, trying to sort through everything: the emotional wreckage, the financial mess, the sense that my entire world had been turned upside down. The house, which I'd poured so much love and effort into, now felt hollow. Every corner reminded me of what I'd lost, of the betrayal that cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever really recover. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the pain. But even there, I couldn't escape the memories. I'd catch myself staring at her things, imagining how she must have planned her escape, how she'd lied to everyone about her true intentions. I was angry at her, of course, but mostly I was hurt. I kept asking myself how she could have been so selfish, so manipulative, so ruthless. She, stolen from us, lied to my face, and then tried to turn everyone against me. That was the part I couldn't get past, the fact that she'd betrayed everything we once stood for. One thing I learned quickly is that trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. I'd thought that maybe someday I could forgive her, maybe forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. But the more I tried, the clearer it became that some wounds just don't heal easily. I started going to therapy, trying to process the betrayal, trying to understand how I could move forward. It helped a little, but deep inside, I knew that trusting anyone again would take a long time. Meanwhile, the legal fight was over, but the emotional fallout was ongoing. Emily moved out, as I said, and she tried to paint herself as the victim in her social circles. She claimed I'd been controlling, jealous, even abusive. That part made me furious. She was always good at twisting stories to make herself look better. But I knew the truth. She was the one who had lied, cheated, and stolen from us. No amount of her crying or fake apologies could undo that. I also found out she'd been trying to rebuild her reputation with her friends, telling them I was the bad guy. It was classic her, turning everything around to make herself seem innocent. But I didn't care anymore. I knew what she was capable of. I had the proof, the evidence, and the court's ruling to back me up. That gave me some peace of mind, at least for a little while. One of the hardest parts was dealing with the aftermath, seeing how her actions affected everyone around us. Our mutual friends, family, some of them believed her lies, others saw through her. I had to learn to let go of the judgment of others and focus on myself. I started rebuilding my life slowly, reconnecting with old friends, focusing on my career, and trying to find some sense of normalcy again. I also realized I'd learned some pretty tough lessons. Trust is fragile. People can deceive you, even those closest to you. And sometimes the greatest betrayal comes not from strangers but from the people you love most. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I survived the worst and I was still standing. That gave me hope that someday I could move past this pain and find happiness again. Looking back, I wish I could say I'd do things differently, but honestly, I don't regret uncovering the truth. It was painful, yes, but necessary. If I hadn't looked deeper, I'd still be living in denial, pretending everything was fine. Now I know my worth, and I know I deserve honesty and respect. I don't think I'll ever forget what happened, but I do believe I can learn to live with it, better, stronger, and more cautious than ever before. And that's what keeps me going. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything, I realize how much I've grown through all of this mess. Losing the woman I thought I knew, the betrayal, the legal battles, none of it was easy. But it forced me to confront some hard truths about trust, loyalty, and what I deserve in life. I've learned that people can surprise you in the worst ways, but also in the best. Sometimes, you have to hit rock bottom to realize your own strength and worth. I've come to accept that the pain from her betrayal will stay with me for a while, but it doesn't define me. I'm not the same person I was before, and maybe that's a good thing. I've learned to be more cautious, more aware, and most importantly, more respectful of myself. I no longer blame myself for her actions. She made her choices and I made mine. Moving forward, I'm focused on rebuilding what I lost, but on my own terms. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's that betrayal hurts, but it also reveals who really matters in your life. Trust is fragile, and when it's broken, the pain is real. But so is your resilience. You can survive, you can heal, and you can find happiness again, even if it takes time. Don't rush. Take care of yourself first. Build your life back slowly, piece by piece. And finally, don't be afraid to seek help, whether from friends, family, or professionals. You don't have to carry all this alone. Sometimes just talking about it helps you see things more clearly. I've learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's part of healing. You have to face the truth, no matter how ugly it is, to move on. So I'm here now, stronger than I was. I may still feel the sting of betrayal, but I refuse to let it define me. I'm rebuilding my life better and wiser, and I know that someday I'll look back at all this and realize it was a turning point. One that made me realize what I truly deserve and what I need to let go of. Life goes on, and I'm ready for whatever comes next.